Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a pretty busy agenda, but I'd like to start off with a piece called Teaching While Undocumented. Unit 4, essential question. Why do people take risks? The high school campus is nearly empty, and the sun has long set as I sit in the staff room planning the next day's lesson. Suddenly, an email from the human resources manager pops up on my screen. Julio, we have your W-2 in my office. Please come see me. My mind drowns among a million thoughts. The following day goes by in slow motion. The anxiety builds up inside of me as the clock in my classroom ticks the seconds away. When the school day is over, I'm ready to face my truth. I slowly walk to her office, pause, take a deep breath. You wanted to see me? We received this letter from the Social Security Administration, she says as she hands it to me. I think we have your number wrong. Can you check your Social Security card and get back to me? I feel as if the room is shrinking and I am trapped with no way out. I battle the knot in my throat, force myself to smile and say, sure, I'll check when I get home. When my mom comes home from work that night, she finds me working practically on a substitute lesson plan. Her Clorox-stained clothes and the wrinkles on her hands caused by the house cleaning chemicals remind me that I have a lot to be thankful for. I invite her into my room to give her the news. Mañana será mi último día. How are you feeling, mijo? Bien, mami. Everything's gonna be okay. I try to sound as normal as possible. I don't want her to see how much this hurts. I don't want her to worry. God has a plan for all of us. He has something better planned for you. Her words are comforting. The following morning, I arrive on campus early. My classroom feels peaceful. I can see my own reflection on the whiteboard, clean and ready for a long day of teaching and learning. The bookshelf in the corner contains prearranged rows of Spanish books waiting to be read. My massive desk in the back of the classroom reminds me what a waste of space it's been, given that I never use it during class. I feel a sense of pride as I examine the student work on the walls. The bell rings too quickly. Before I know it, my students are at the door. I go through the day as if nothing is happening, pretending like I'm not hurting inside, knowing that this is the last time I will see my students. This weekend, there is no homework. Maestro, are you feeling well? A student asked, knowing that no homework is not in my character. I nod, not wanting to give anything away with the sound of my voice. I wish I could tell them what is really going on, tell them what an honor it's been to teach and see them flourish in so many ways. Thank them for everything they've taught me. Tell them that it is true, that anything is possible when you set your mind to it. I wonder what they'll think of me when I stop showing up without a reason, without saying goodbye. My heart skips a beat when I hear the last bell ring, signaling the end of the school day, screaming at me that my time is up. I walk to the HR manager's office, convinced that this is the end, only to find that she's already gone. Determined to get it over with, I call her cell phone. What's going on? I need to speak with you about the letter you received. My voice shakes as I begin to speak. The number you have in my file is the number I gave you. There is no other number. A long pause. You don't need to tell me anymore. My instinct is to say more, but my nerves don't allow it. I did what I had to do in reaction to the situation society has placed me in. This is the country that has seen me grow and learn, and I owe so much to this place. Teaching has been the most rewarding way of giving back. These words did not find a way out. I need to check with our lawyers. Stay home on Monday. We'll call you to follow up. I sit there in silence, frozen in time, everything I've worked so hard to achieve, all my schooling, preparation, the countless hours spent planning, grading, teaching. None of it matters at this point. 9 numbers stand between me and my dreams. But God has a plan for all of us. I know that something better awaits. Thank you. Thank you so much. So that was over 2 years ago now, this was actually January of 2011 when that happened. I was teaching at Downtown College Prep, and one of my colleagues is actually here. Hello. And some students are actually here, so it's really powerful to be able to share these stories. It kind of feels like redemption. You know, in the moment, everything happened so fast that I didn't have a lot of time to process. But when I found E4FC and I engaged in this process of storytelling and creative writing, it became a really healing, a really powerful experience, and a really powerful vehicle for connecting with others. So that is what we're doing today, storytelling for undocumented young people. My name is Julio Navarrete. We also have Chantiri Ramirez, Akiko Aspillaga, and Denia Ramirez. Oh, disculpa, Perez. So our agenda, we're gonna start with some introductions. We're gonna share a few more stories, and then we'll open up a space for question and answers. Questions about the writing process or about our personal stories or anything that you're interested in hearing about. And then we're going to learn about how to create a safe and nurturing space at your school for storytelling, for creative writing as a way of healing, processing, advocacy as well. And then we'll do a closing. Sound good? Yeah. Cool. So let's start with some introductions. If I can ask you all to join me up here and tell us, again, your name, where you're from, and why you write.
Hi everyone, I'm Chantiri. I am currently a student, again, at UCLA. And why I write. I really believe in the power of expressing oneself and the healing that can come from it. I endorse that and I believe in it, and even the work, the academic work that I'm doing has to do with that. So in writing, I have found a way for me to feel better, to heal, to come to terms with things that otherwise I may not have done otherwise. So that's a little bit of why.
Hi everyone, my name's Akiko Aspillaga. I just graduated from SF State with a bachelor's in nursing, and I am currently the community organizer for Aspire, and Aspire is a Pan-Asian undocumented youth organization that started 5 years ago, and we started as a support group and became more of an advocacy than an organizing group because we saw the need for it, especially when it comes to the lack of the API voice. And for me, writing is something that is cathartic for me. I have so many feelings and emotions that is very difficult to talk to people about, even my closest friends. And when I have all of these pent-up emotions, I just put it down on paper, and sometimes they don't even make sense, and I just keep writing and writing, and somehow I find some solace in that. But other times, when I read it back again, and I'm like, oh, I have a lot of problems. And sometimes there's no conclusion, there's no solution. But at the same time, like, just getting it out there for me was very healing, and I really like coming back into writing again, because before I started the E4FC creative writing, I kind of stopped that because it was a little too much for my emotions, but I'm glad that I started back again.
Hello everyone, my name's Denia Perez, and I am originally from Mexico City, and I came to the US when I was 11 months old, but I grew up in Sonoma County in Santa Rosa, California, and I also graduated from San Francisco State, go Gators, with a BA in Women and Gender Studies, and my plan is to apply to law school in the fall. And I actually am not a writer, and going into the creative writing program was kind of a way for me to challenge myself, because the way I kind of like release whatever tension and anxiety I'm feeling is through running and exercise. But I remember that as a kid, I would write a lot. I would write a lot of different stories, and I was a lot more creatively inclined. But when I got to academia, I like had to suppress the creativity and like exchange it for like, MLA format, like grammar rules, and just like research papers. So I just wanted to tap into the little Denia that would write stories and let her imagination run wild. So it was a really great opportunity to reconnect with that part of myself that I kind of lost. So
Great, let's give them a hand.
about to share with you all, I wrote it about 2.5 years ago, when a group of students here at UC Berkeley, I have recently graduated from here, and a group of us came together and we were thinking about starting a space where we could share our stories and where we could do some creative writing. So I've been doing this process for a few years, and this is the first story I wrote. And it is titled, I Am a Turtle, and it is after an Gloria Ansaldúa quote that goes, I am a turtle. Wherever I go, I carry home in my back. Undocumented immigrants carry on their backs a deep sense of displacement. One day you're here, the next day you're there. You're continuously running from place to place, building homes, leaving homes. You miss what you once had. It's hard to leave what you have now. Your heart moves from reality to reminiscence, from what you see to what you dream. The years go by and you wonder, will I ever go back? I moved. I was always moving. For years, my mom, my sister, and I rented bedrooms in people's apartments. 4 by 6, that was it. 1 bed, 1 desk, 1 dresser. We left home because home was a dangerous place. It had a man who didn't know how to love. We came to the US looking for a new home, and we made temporary little homes in apartment bedrooms. Metamorphosis. I became a turtle. Since I was 10, I've been carrying home. I took it to the west side, to downtown, to the coast, and when the time to volar on my own came, I took it to Berkeley, I took it to Oakland. It's with me in Hayward. My home is in my heart. I never go back to an infrastructure, a building, a hood. I have never gone back to the house where I learned how to walk, to the house where I had my 10th birthday party, to the apartment where I was picked up to go to prom. Home is on the move, never stable. Home is in my heart and las memorias. Home is in the touch of my mother's hands, the cries of Pulguita, the face of my sister. Home is in the smell of sopes. Home is in the Facebook pictures of my elementary school friends who I have not seen in more than a decade. My home is in the memories. And the memories are on una little shelf. This is where I shield them. This is where I make sure that the meaning of my home is protected. I carry this shield in my back, in the same place where I carry mis ganas de vivir. I became a turtle because I wanted to have a home that could move with me, como una casita móvil. I am a turtle. Wherever I go, I carry home in my back. Thank you.
My piece is called Chaotic with a Chance of Immigration Reform. When I was 8, I wanted to chase tornadoes and track down hurricanes. I was fascinated by the power of nature and the beauty, chaos, destruction, and endless possibilities left behind by these remarkable storms. That same year, I learned what it meant to live through a legal, man-made hurricane called an ice raid. I learned about and developed an awareness of the kind of chaos, destruction, and endless possibilities that follow after one's parents' close encounter with immigration officials. I quickly realized that while this storm had completely swept away any naivete I had about what it meant to be undocumented and any hopes I had of leading a normal childhood, this experience also developed a sense of compassion, drive, patience, and hope within me. My parents braved the ice storm that day and showed me that while the life of an undocumented person is uncertain and full of risks, one must continue to respectfully defy the forces of man that oppress us with dignity and persistence. A storm chaser does not stay at home and wait for the aftermath. A storm chaser carefully tracks the storm's course and learns how to adapt and survive. My parents have braved many storms and have taught me that unconditional love manifests itself in incredible sacrifices and life-altering decisions. Simply put, Genoveva Noriega and Salvador Perez are my heroes and the best storm chasers I have been blessed to be guided by. While I no longer have my heart set on making a living off of tracking down some of nature's most powerful creations, I do find myself caught in the middle of a political firestorm that will determine mine and my parents' legal fate. In the upcoming months, the weather on Capitol Hill is forecasted to be chaotic with a chance of immigration reform. There will be a whirlwind of debate as to who should be allowed to stay and how they will be regulated. My hope is that the policymakers and lobbyists remember that those 11 million undocumented folk, people like my parents and I, are not the ones to blame for the effects of man-made storms. Rather than focus on those individuals who have chased the storm in hopes of finding a better life, I hope these legislators focus on the conditions that led up to the storm and how things like globalization, capitalism, and trade policy create mass patterns of northern migration. The problem is not the storm, mass migration itself, but the policies and decisions that displace people and create a cyclone of poverty, death, unemployment, and movement from one location to another. Regardless of the destruction and chaos and uncertainty that the next few months will bring, I pray that the calm at the end of the storm proves to be full of just and humane possibilities for those of us who have been chasing it for many, many years.
A reflection on the comprehensive immigration reform and its effects on my mother and her health. And this poem is entitled Only for a Moment. I don't have time to see the doctor. I'm healthy enough. Akiko, you worry too much. May 9, 2013, Mama exclaimed proudly, Anak, I may be old again, but I still look like I'm 40. And yet she feels bolder. She estimated a 3,500 tons weight sits perched on her fragile back. Her headaches are like earthquake with a magnitude of 8.0. It destroys the foundation of her skull, ignites fires in her temples that runs to the base of her neck. Unable to stand the quake, she drinks Tylenol like she drinks water, but only for a moment she can breathe again. For a moment, she is young again. Her once strong hands that climbed Mount Pinatubo and Mount Fuji, hands that carried me as a baby, have grown weak, unable to grasp my hand strong enough so she can feel me. Hands inflamed from an autoimmune reaction leading to synovial hypertrophy and chronic joint inflammation, technical words that are not enough to describe the limited movement of her hands and the deformity of her once slender fingers. Again, she drinks Tylenol like she drinks water, but only for a moment she can breathe again. Only for a moment she's young again. Day after day, I hear her voice haunting me. Anak, if I die, sell all my jewelry, my possessions, so you can bury me without debt. But Anak, if I go to the hospital, I will bury you in debt. Her words penetrated my very core, a virus that invaded the foundation of my immigrant justice. While I protest, rally, tell my story, while I go to college to pursue my dreams of being a nurse, while I feed patients, clean their wounds, give them medication, my mother is in pain, older and sicker, dying. Her body gives warning signs every day. It taunts me as if to ask, who do you fight for? What do you fight for? An immigration reform that will only make me wait 15 years for proper care, wait 15 years for a test to figure out the origin of my pain, wait 15 years to get prescription for the right medication. Anak, every day I am dying. Right now, she doesn't have a choice but to drink Tylenol like she drinks water. So for a moment, she can breathe again. For a moment, she can be young again. I feel my bones tatter and tear, skin burning ash, feel numb from the fire that runs through my nerves. 12-hour shifts, organize, study full time. I don't realize how difficult it is to breathe. Consciously, I feel my diaphragm drop. Lung tissues slowly expand, taking more effort than usual. I run out of energy to try to shield her from the cruelty, the pain, and heal her. So I drink Tylenol like I drink water, to breathe again, to be young again, because I am also dying.
Thank Okay, so I want to call Denia, Chantiri, and Akiko back up here so we can do a Q&A session. And just to set a frame for this conversation, if we can try to keep the questions concise, and also that not all of us might answer every single question. So whatever you feel inspired to answer. And I'm going to start with a question for the three of them. You can talk to us about why you feel that it's important for us to share our stories.
I feel like it's important to share stories because, as we saw in the video earlier, those who are in power are the ones speaking for us. And 99% of the time, our stories are left out. You don't hear about our pain, what our families are going through. And without us lifting our own voices, the dialogue is never, ever gonna change. And that is why I tell my story, and that is why I become vulnerable in front of people and take this chance, this leap of faith, because hopefully, you know, those who are in the middle or those who are, you know, on the right and whatnot can feel how we're feeling and, you know, put themselves in our shoes and see what we're really going through. Because most of the time they hear about stories that aren't real, fabricated by, you know, those who are in power.
Yeah, I guess kind of on that same tip, I think by sharing our stories, it helps put a face to the issue. I know that I grew up in a predominantly white, upper middle class area, and although there were a lot of Latino, like undocumented people, the only people I knew in school who were undocumented, I was like myself. I didn't know anyone else who was undocumented. So I didn't share my story for a really long time because I wasn't sure what kind of reaction I would get, or, you know, if my friends would like call the migra. My parents were always like, you can't tell we're undocumented because you never know who might call who. And so it was really hard for me to like be completely myself with my friends because I felt like they couldn't relate. We're all born here. And so when I did finally decide to come out, the overwhelming support and just like reactions I got were made me question why I hadn't done it sooner. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna have any friends, like people are gonna judge me, and like what if I put my parents in danger? But most of my friends are just like, what can we do to help? This is so messed up. You've lived here your whole life, like can we adopt you? And so it just like solidified my decision to come out, and made me confident in that. Like, I think a lot of the time people just don't know or don't think they know someone who's undocumented or think they can relate to the issue. But once we start speaking out and they can see, like, I'm not just some statistic or some like person running over the border, like I'm your classmate, I'm your friend, I'm your daughter's friend, it's easier for them to relate and not other us as a community or as an issue. It becomes their issue as well. So I think that's why I share my story.
So I think they said a lot that is true to me too. Part of the reason has to do with the fact that we don't really get to hear the stories, the news, the political debates that are going on. We're not included. But more than anything, I do think, and I do subscribe to this idea that for any sort of change within oneself, there has to be an exploration of going into the deep things that we don't want to face. And sometimes writing is the process of doing that. And yeah, when I think of any person that I admire and how they have come to this process of political consciousness, it starts with that. It starts with facing those things that make us uncomfortable from within. So that is part of the reason why I write. And yeah.
My parents were about to be deported, and I didn't know what to do. And I was just like, well, if I'm going to be deported, I guess I should tell people I'm not going to be back at school. So yeah, it was 3 years ago, no, almost 4 years ago, exactly in February. And yeah, I think it was the best decision of my life because for a long time I hated who I was and I was so ashamed. But when I came out and my friends were just like, so concerned, like crying with me and just like, what can we do for your family? And that's what made me come out. I was like, if I'm not going to tell my story, like no one else is going to speak for me. Like Audre Lorde said, like, you know, like we have to be able to speak up. No one's going to speak up for us. I'm like totally paraphrasing that, but yeah, just knowing that like if I didn't say something, no one else was. So.
Yes.
So you guys have amazing, powerful stories, and I do believe in the power of a story and sharing our stories. You know, it's important to, especially in this country, we come across so many different life stories, and it's very important to share them. And I work with high school students, and this past semester I helped them apply for college. They had to write their personal statements, and several of them did not want to share did not want to share their status. They would tell me, you know, there's a lot more to me than just being undocumented, and it's a personal statement. But hearing your stories is just so powerful. And so, what would be your message to these high school students in terms of like how to present themselves when they face these situations?
I do believe that we are, our identities is conformed of many identities and intersectionalities of those identities. So for the longest time, I think a lot of the people I know, and even myself, we're not wanting to like point that out because we're so much more than that. But I do think that for me, if I were to tell this to someone else, being an immigrant has been the foundation of who I am. Like, seeing the struggle of my mom, and even the pieces that I shared today, both at the hall, at Wheeler Hall and here, go back to that. Go back to like my genesis, where it all starts with that migration. So for me, I think those things that are the most important will come up in the high schoolers' personal statements. But I would say, if you think about it, really, like, if you nail and go deep, I think the immigrant experience, it's so embedded, and it's kind of a glue to all of these intersectionalities. So, but it does require a lot of going into uncomfortable spaces. And when you're 17 years old, maybe there's a little bit of a push to not go into those uncomfortable places. And that is why it's so cool that you're all here and that you're all willing to support students in that process.
I think also because for my high school statement, I did not write about being undocumented. I was too scared. I still wasn't in that space, you know. I actually just started sharing my story about 2.5 years ago. And in high school, I was not prepared at all. Because for one, I thought I was the only undocumented person in the world. And for two, it's like I felt very uncomfortable sharing my story. So I feel like it would be powerful for them to share it, but if they're not ready, I don't think we should push them. All right, it's good to, you know, kind of give them advice, but if they're not ready for it, I think we should accept the fact that they're not there yet, and it's okay.
So there's a question here, and then we'll go.
Yeah. You've talked about, you've made it clear the value of writing for yourselves. And I'm wondering, I work in a community college, and I'm wondering, what can we do to help create a safe space to encourage students to do more writing? You know, is there something that we, faculty, can do?
I'm gonna give you a packet of resources, and we'll go through some ideas, some suggestions for how to create that space at your institution right after the Q&A. Yeah. Thank you. So there's a question back there. And then we'll go to the front.
Do you share your stories with your families, and if so, what is your reaction? Just sharing, like talking to my mom. I feel like now I'm able to do it, but I mean, these are some pretty emotional pieces that your parents, like, what would they say? You know,
I haven't shared a writing per se, but during the course of the summer when I was in the creative writing program, I did have a lot of conversations, especially with my dad. Long story short, like our relationship was like has been kind of strained. My parents got a divorce anyway. Wow. But I felt like this was a way for us to reconnect, and so in a lot of the exercises we would have to, and like the homework and reading that we got, it would require us to write down about like memories or childhood, and I don't know, I felt inspired to just talk to my dad and not necessarily share my writing, but just kind of hear about his experience being an immigrant man in this country, and like hearing again all the sacrifices like he's had to make so that I could be here, has inspired a lot of what I do and my writing. So I haven't shared writing per se, but I mean my parents knew that I took the course, and we've had a lot of conversations about the subject matter.
Okay. For me, it's very difficult to talk to my mom or my brother about it because I don't know, maybe it's my family or the Asian culture in general. There's still a lot of shame when it comes to being undocumented. And I'm very open to it, but my mom is like, Kiko, what are you doing? You know? And she's very protective of me. And I don't think she's in that space yet to talk about it freely, though she knows what I do and whatnot. And I think if I share her my story, it would really break her heart more than anything. Because for me, I try to hide a lot of the things that I'm feeling from my mother, because I don't want her to worry. And it's like my defense mechanism, I guess. I always pretend like I'm happy when I'm not, and there's a lot of things that I have inside that I can only expose in paper, and even in daily conversations with my friends, it's very difficult to open that gate for me. And
I translated the piece that I wrote and I performed at Wheeler. I translated that for my mom, and it was it was something else. We got really emotional, both of us, especially because for her, as a 28-year-old woman crossing the border with an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, it was a really traumatic experience for herself. So revisiting that part of her life was tough. But I think my mom is a very strong woman. So we cried, but it was a beautiful moment. So yeah, like I said, going into those uncomfortable places sometimes it's not easy, but something very beautiful can come out of it too.
So we have time for just 2 more questions, and I think we had one question here and then one over here.
Okay, so I would like to thank you all for sharing your story. We do need a face for this movement. I feel like I could relate to a lot of what you guys say. I myself, I was thinking of writing something, but I don't know, it's just difficult for me to actually, get in touch with my emotions and all these things. So I was just wondering, what advice do you guys have or something to give me?
I can relate to that because, as I said earlier, like it was hard for me to be creative when I was always like writing research papers, or I didn't think of myself like as a writer or like, poet, and so it was really hard. So I think the first thing it was just like I had to just like talk myself through and like just and not think, just write, don't think about it, because I'm very much like, oh, that period's out of place, like this is wrong, it's not an MLA format, but just like if you can just like not think about it and don't look at it until you're just done writing, do some free writes. I think that was really helpful for me, because when you like start to think about it or question or like, oh, this is stupid, or like, oh, I should have done this different, then like you'll stop. But if you just let yourself write for like 5 minutes or whatever, like that was helpful for me.
Okay, first kind of a silly question. When are you going to compile all of these stories and publish it in a book? Because I think that would be incredibly powerful for educators to have access to be able to read out loud to their students, because we don't have you to come in, so it would be great to have a resource like that. So E4FC, that's what I want to see next. But all of you have talked about like this being kind of a processing experience for you. do you think maybe one or two of you could tell us about like kind of where you felt you were at, kind of like mentally, emotionally before you started writing to process, and then now after you've been writing for a while? I know it's a really deep question, sorry.
Emotionally, where were you before writing, and where are you now?
Do you feel like it's expanded your ability to kind of cope and process, or I don't know?
So I am currently starting a PhD program at UCLA, which requires for me to start thinking in very like academic ways, you know, and suppress that sort of like creative writing, which is tough for me because I really enjoy writing in this creative voice. So where I was at, I was completely like not in a good place. I had not found a job. I had just graduated from UC Berkeley, and I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? But then I started finding these circles, and it was through the undocumented student group here at Berkeley, through my peers in RISE, and then later on through E4FC that I started finding myself in a better place. And writing actually helped me with that past. And it's interesting because every time I would write, and even now, every time I write, my genesis is that moment when we crossed the border and all that struggle that came with my mom and my sister and trying to go through life undocumented. So where do I find myself? I definitely find myself in a better place. Where's my writing at? I think because of academia, it is like on the side. So, and it hurts me that it's on the side. But I try to stay engaged with my writing, and I keep reading poets and whatnot. You gotta keep that place or that peace that comes with poetry and creative writing.
For me, where I was before, 2.5 years ago, I got into the nursing program at SF State. And before then, I didn't know that there was even a movement. I'm like, what's that? And I was very much, I was very not uninformed about a lot of things, a lot of policies, a lot of what are my rights. And I was in this closet. I don't want to say closet. I was in this little box, you know. I put myself in this box, and when I got into the program and they were asking me so many of these things, social security number, background check, health insurance, I had none of those, and I went kind of emotionally unstable, and I found Aspire, and when I met with them and met with undocumented API people, I didn't know they existed, and it was great. I was able to relate with them, and they helped me, supported me, and that's when I started to reflect on myself, because we would ask these check-in questions or just, you know, have these organic conversations with each other. It was never like, oh, I want to write about my feelings about being undocumented. It was this organic feelings and conversations with them. And so when I feel that I'm in a bad place, I write sometimes, and also those writings can be also just your speeches or, you know, articles, and it's very helpful for me to put these all down into words. And now I feel better. I can talk more about my undocumented status with most of my friends, not all, because, you know, there are those that you just, yeah, I can't talk about this with you. And but I think I'm pretty good. I'm in a good space. Yeah.
Cool. Let's give Akiko, Didi, and Denia a hand. This is not meant to be like the one answer, the one way of creating a space for storytelling at your institution. But this is what I've done. I created a group at Summit High School, which is where I teach now, for students to create in this medium. So again, this is just an example of what you can do, but by all means, we're all we have so much knowledge collectively that if you have other ideas, please feel free to just shout them out. Let this be a conversation.
Do we have more?
How many do we need? Just 3. I only have one more, but there's 2 there? Yeah. Cool. I could also email this out. Maybe we can pass out. Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. So I'm going to pass out this notebook. And if you want these resources via email, just go ahead and write your name and your email address. So when I started this group at my school, first I started speaking to individual students that I thought might be interested in joining a creative writing club. And then once I saw that there was interest by students, I put out an announcement to the whole school. And when we first met, some of the things that we need to do is to make sure that we're creating a safe space. And we do that by setting norms. In your packet, you're going to see my sample agenda. It's on the 4th page. Yes. So 2nd sheet of paper, 4th page, creative writing workshop, sample agenda. We started with a name game, get to know you, some community building, talking about what is the purpose of this space. So having a really clear purpose, a really clear outcome. This is a space to support you in sharing your story, your personal experiences, in giving feedback to one another. This is a safe space where we respect confidentiality. We are not going to share these stories with anyone outside of the space until the person who shared that story does it first, right? So if I haven't shared that story outside, it's going to stay in here. Making sure that we are not pushing students to share beyond their comfort zone. It's really sensitive to dig back into these experiences. And sometimes we can open wounds, and if left open, they can cause more harm than good. So the person has to be comfortable with entering that space again. And we're not forcing any student to share beyond their comfort level. So yeah, setting a safe space, building community, having clear goals, and this is all in your packet as well. Then we talked about, first and foremost, what is creative writing, right? So I always like to talk about or ask them, when you write an essay for school, what is your process like? And then they say, well, usually it's a 5-paragraph essay, and you need to have a thesis, and sometimes evidence, and there's a very clear structure, right? So then I talk about, okay, so the writing process, I use a metaphor. Think of it as you're getting ready to go to school in the morning, right? You wouldn't put on your clothes and comb your hair before you jump in the shower, right? So the writing process is kind of like that. First, you need to make a mess. You need to write. You need to just get everything out, right? That's your shower. You're like getting clean, getting everything out. And then at the end, you get dressed, you make yourself look beautiful. And that's where editing comes in, right? At the end, that's when we're going to see if everything is spelled correctly, if the format is what you want it to be. But the very first thing that we focus on is the content, right? Without worrying about mechanics or structure or any of that. So in creative writing, this is a process of discovery. Sometimes it happens subconsciously. Like I've had stories just pop into my head. It's the weirdest thing. Like I'm brushing my teeth in the morning and I hear a story, like it's being told to me. It's so weird. And what I like to do, because I don't want to forget those pieces, is I just pull out my phone and I record. And it's literally like I'm a medium and somebody's like dictating to me. It's so weird. So it's a process of discovery. Sometimes, we get inspired by pieces of writing or by a quote, right, or by something that we experienced or something that we heard or saw. Creative writing doesn't have to be explained. It doesn't have to make sense. And it can take many forms, right? It can be a poem. It can be a short story. It can be a letter. It can be a journal entry. It can be a whole number of things. And then we talk about what is personal narrative, right? So a story that is grounded on personal experience, that's personal narrative, right? So all the stories that we shared today, there are stories, And then the question that I often get is, what if I don't remember all of the details? I want to write about that moment when I came to the US with my family, but I don't remember exactly everything that happened. So we talk about the difference between fact and truth, right? Facts can be verified. So if I say that the officer that pulled me over in the middle of Nevada was wearing dusty black shoes, somebody has to be able to verify that, if that's a fact, right? But in creative writing, we're not writing facts. That's not what is important. What is important is the essence of the story, the truth. It's our truth. It's our story, so we get to tell it. Those minor details we can imagine into the story, right? Even if right now we stopped and we said, let's write a piece about what you've experienced in the last 30 minutes, I bet you that every single one of us would write a completely different piece because we all experience things differently. So in creative writing, it's our experience, it's our story. Okay? Then we talk about why stories are powerful, what impact they can have, why should we share our stories and why. And this is just to begin a conversation. As the group progresses, then students start getting more comfortable with sharing their stories, with being vulnerable. And then we talk about different places where we can inspire stories. So a big one is pieces that are prose, so like short stories. This is from House on Mango Street, Sandra Cisneros. It's one page of her book called My Name, and you have it in your packet. And I like to use this piece because it's really simple, it's really accessible to all students, and it shows a lot of vivid sensory detail, sensory imagery. So we read the story together, and then we talk about what makes this a strong story, right? So we talk about using concrete, vivid details. So like, for example, when she says, at school they say my name funny, as if the syllables were made out of tin and hurt the roof of your mouth. But in Spanish, my name is made out of something, a softer something, like silver. So those details that she's using to describe her name and what it feels like in the mouth and what it looks like, what color it is, she's using so much concrete, vivid details to put you in the experience. We talk about being specific, right? It's really important when we share our story that we paint a picture for the audience, right? That we're being really specific and bringing them into a moment. A lot of times when students first start writing, they write generally about their story. They write not in the moment, but in the past about their story, about what happened. And as readers, we tend to not connect as much with ambiguous moments. But if it's really specific and the story is engaging all of our senses, right? What this person is seeing, what they're feeling, what they're tasting, what they're smelling, what they're hearing, all of that, that brings the reader into the story. You feel that story with the writer. And that goes along with showing versus telling, and this is something that in every session keep coming back to. Okay, are you showing in this piece, or are you telling? For example, I wrote a piece about getting pulled over in Nevada because I almost got arrested. I was driving without a license to my uncle's house in Idaho, so 12 hours from San Jose, and I get pulled over, and it was like the most frightening experience I've been through. So I wrote a piece about it because it's how I process, it's how I can externalize those emotions. And so I give the example, if I'm telling you what happened, I would say, I almost got arrested. But if I'm showing you what happened, I would say something like, put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest. The officer reaches for his handcuffs. I can already feel the cold metal pressed tightly around my wrist. This cannot be happening. So I'm showing you, I'm bringing you into the story, right? And it's the same exact experience. I almost got arrested, I'm telling you, and the other part, I'm showing you what happened. And in writing, they're both good, right? There are some parts of the story that we want to tell. Maybe it's not the most important part of the story. We want to move forward in time. We want to give a lot of information in a short amount of time. But the moments that are most charged, the ones that are most important to your piece, those are the moments that you want to show in full, vivid detail. And then the last thing that we talk about for a strong story is placing the reader or the audience into the story from the very beginning. So not giving a lot of background information, because we tend to do that, right? Like everything about what happened the week before and all the moments leading up to that story. But the reader actually doesn't need all the information. And if it's really important to the story, you can intertwine it throughout, right? So that story about me getting pulled over, I should probably share that, huh? Keep talking about it. I started with, were you born in the US or another country? I'm sorry, officer, I don't feel comfortable answering that question. All right, then put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest. Those are the first lines of that story, right? And then I go back in time. So that morning, I got up, I was getting ready for my trip to Idaho, blah, blah, blah. So going right into the moment. So with this piece, and you have this prompt, you have a list of prompts in the second page, writing exercises, and this is one of those, I believe. Maybe not. But anyway, if you have your email, I can send you the presentation as well. It's going around, right?
Yes.
Cool. So after we read that story, my name, and we talk about it, and we talk about the elements of that story, I'll give a prompt, right? Think about your own name. Where did it come from? What meanings does it have for you? Does it convey anything about who you are? And then one specific incident, one memory, one moment connected to that name, so that we're talking not in general about the name, but we're actually sharing a story, sharing a moment. So then I would ask students to share out, right? Either do a quick pair share, and then whoever feels comfortable can share with the whole group. We talk about free writing as well, right? First, what is a free write? So talking about strategy, we just want to unload all the thoughts, all the emotions on paper, right? We're externalizing them, so it's no longer a part of us. We're interested in your ideas, in your experience, not in the mechanics, so spelling, grammar, punctuation. And English teachers probably like cringe at that, but that comes later, right? That's part of the editing process. And then also silencing the editor in our head. So a lot of times, we don't even know how to start, right? And we write the first sentence and, oh my God, it sounds dumb. I don't know if it's making sense. So in free writing, we get rid of all that. You just write. Whatever comes to you, just write it. I also do visualization activity, which how are we on time? Okay, so I won't do it, but if there's time at the end, we'll do it. So a visualization activity would be asking the participants to close their eyes, to breathe, to place their feet on the ground, to ground themselves, and this is a big risk for a lot of students, so you want to make sure you have a safe space, right? Guiding them through a series of snapshots, like imagine you're walking down a path. So I'll read a few lines. Imagine that you're walking down a path. Notice the feeling of the cool air on your face as you walk down this path. Notice the sound of the ground under your feet. As you look down the path, you see a person in the distance. This person may be someone you haven't talked to, but you wish you could. So that gives you a glimpse of, and you can find a lot of these online, right? How to help the group enter a space through this visualization activity. Once we come back, start writing with this prompt or sentence starter. I remember. Anything that comes to you, just free write on it. Again, a pair share, a share out. Using poetry as well, you have this poem in your packet. It's Sonrisas by Pat Mora. And it's a poem about being stuck between two worlds, right? You live in this hallway, and in this world, it's my familia, it's tamales, it's laughter, it's conversation. But in this world, it's like I'm a professional, I'm a teacher, and it's cognitive skills, and it's rubrics, and so that's my own example, right? But read this poem, and then use a prompt so again, we will talk about the elements of the poem, use a prompt to inspire writing. So I think there's a question there, and then we'll go, it's a lot of questions, but I'll stick around after to answer.
It's not really a question, just kind of responding to what you asked about sharing. So my name is Luz, I'm at Cal State LA, and I'm a UOP counselor and what they call the advisor for AB 540 students. And our students, they have an annual it's called Stepping Out of the Shadows, SOS. And they also have a Stepping Into the Shadows. They have these two events, and they're held in what we call our free speech area, and we just had a couple days ago. And the students share their very, very powerful stories, but they share it out in front of everyone. And it's very, very powerful, very emotional. And it's really interesting because you see students walking by on their way to class and they just stop and they're just frozen and they're just really into these stories. And it's so brave. It's so brave for our students and for people to just hear these stories. So I know that it's just so powerful. So that's kind of our experience at Cal State LA, second year going on. But now that I'm in this workshop, I the light bulb just went on, and I'm like, we need to do a group. We need to do a creative writing group. We need to bring that together. So I'm going to take that back with me. So
that's
thank
great.
you for inspiring that.
Thank you. Sorry.
I have a question about something I've struggled with, still struggle, my long road in academia, because I feel like, especially in college, and in the English major, and with the Raza major too, is this emphasis on the explicit, on making things explicit, the academic being explicit, and showing, don't tell, even some of the things you were talking about, I feel like we're still stressing making things explicit. Mm-hmm. My question, or that I want to pose to everybody, is how do we tap into the implicit and nonverbal forms of communication and expression, and something along those lines, the spaces, I think that so many of us live in those intersections, and the ambiguity, and kind of exercise our right to not have to identify or not have to place ourselves into rigid forms, type of thing. How do we tap into the explicit? That's my question. It's something I struggle with, within the academy especially.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
I think there are some really good models of academics who are very creative and accessible. And I'm going to send you a list of suggestions for that. I mean, there are, all of the people that we've talked about, Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks, Gloria Anzaldúa, there are lots who were very powerful scholars and wonderful poets or dancers or songwriters.
Speak a little bit on that. I teach in sociology at Berkeley City College, and I'm always struggling with making my students be objective when I don't believe in it. And I'm trying my best, right? And so I this term with one class am doing a creative workshop talent show, and I've actually used it as a quote-unquote service learning component, which you can actually get mini grants through various institutions if you invite the community in and you relate it to the curriculum in your course description on the syllabus. There's little ways to strong arm the academy that I'm working on. So I'm trying to incorporate stuff through my curriculum, but you have to pass it through the boss as if it's this objective experience, right? So anyways, I'm trying to figure that out too. But I've got so many ideas now, and I'm really excited about it. But that might be one way that educators can do it. Call it service learning, invite the community, call the community your college and your families, and relate it to my curriculum around race, gender, class, sexuality, identity. But anyways, that's one way that I'm thinking about it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would love to stay informed. Whatever ideas you're taking with you, if you want to implement, please let me know if there's anything that I can do to support that. Or just let me know how it's going. Yeah.
Sorry, before you close, some of you have wanted published stories. I just brought a book that we did. I'm from Utah, so I'm out of my league here, but this is something we put together where we interviewed students. It was a lot easier for them to talk sometimes than write. Mm-hmm. And then my partner photographed the students, and we let them choose how much of themselves they wanted to reveal in their photograph. And then they did a free write about what they saw in the picture. And so the book, this is actually a documentary exhibit that travels framed pieces, but that's kind of cumbersome, so we published it. And if any of you are interested in looking at it or want to get information on it, that's one way we addressed it in Utah.
That's beautiful. I mean, it's
The name of it is called Dreamers Living in the Shadow of Hope. And there's, I have some business cards with the web page. You can order the book online, or you can see me. I don't mean to interrupt your closing, but.
That's the beauty of arts and creativity, right? Unlimited possibilities to what we can do. So we have a website, thingsonneversay.org, where you can find information about the contest that will be coming up in the summer, I believe. Writing pieces, audio, video pieces, art and photography. There's a section for educators as well with other resources. There's also a space here for sharing your story, or if your students are interested in sharing their story on the website, they can submit a piece or a video or a piece of art or anything art related. So that's all I have. If you want to write me some questions, because I'm totally not professional, but I don't have business cards. I have a website, julionavarrete.com. You can find other of my stories, videos on my website. You can send me a message there, or feel free to come talk to me.
Thank you.